You are listening to the Social Science KLAI-descope. Hello, everyone. This is the very first episode of the Social Science KLAI-descope with me, Kevin Lai, or KLAI. A lot of my friends call me KLAI, so you can call me either. I don't mind. Anyways, welcome to the podcast. And this is a very exciting time for me. I'm pursuing a project that I've always, in some sense, dreamed about or thought about doing, and now I'm making it a reality. I've been listening to so many podcasts during quarantine, either about music, about life, about relationships, and I really just wanted to jump in onto the podcasting fun. And so this podcast is going to be about social sciences. And later in the episode, I'll get into more about my motivation, my hopes for this podcast. Just know that I'm going to be taking a lot of feedback from you all and just learning as I do episode by episode. Before we begin the content, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my podcast. There are quite literally a million podcasts out there. Like, at least for me during my week, I listen to 6 or 7 podcasts, one for about each day. So I know there's a lot of podcasts out there and there's not a lot of time. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me speak about social sciences. So what do I want to talk about in the very first episode of the Social Science KLAI-descope? Well, mostly just for me personally, I really want to interact with and interview and talk to a large number of younger or junior members of the profession. And so that could be research analysts, that could be current college students, that could be junior faculty. Really just to get a sense of what their research ideas are, how to promote research, talking about pressing issues that they're interested in, their motivations or agenda, and just basically how they got to where they are. I think for me, it would be a really good learning experience, and I really want to share that to the listeners, and hopefully you as listeners can also come along for the ride and learn about these brilliant young social scientists. I also just really want to share and showcase my network. I have a lot of good friends in college and from my RA cohort after I graduated college, and they just have gone on to do some wonderful things or just starting on paths to do wonderful things. And so really want to hear and share their perspectives on certain issues, certain interests, in a very casual, no pressure kind of way. So why the name Social Science KLAI-descope? It's a very peculiar use of the word kaleidoscope, but let me start with the definition. A kaleidoscope is an optical instrument with 2 or more reflecting surfaces tilted to each other in an angle, so that one or more objects on one end of the mirror are seen as regular symmetrical patterns when viewed from the other end due to repeated reflection. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that definition. And so how does that relate to social sciences? Well, if we think about the social science, there are just a lot of subcategories and subfields. And so broadly speaking, you have social science at the top, and then maybe you go down a level and you'll see like there's economics, which is what I've studied and I've pretty much worked on. There's political science, there's anthropology, there's sociology, there's psychology, there's geography, and the list just goes on. And so there's broad fields there, and then you go a level down and there's even more levels. And so there's just a lot of different angles, different views, different ways of thinking that the people or professionals in those variety of fields have under this one branch, social science. And sometimes those different levels of social science will work together really nicely. And so, for example, that's like political science and economics. or sociology and anthropology. And sometimes they're completely unrelated to each other. And so I really want to get a sense of painting this very complete picture through these various different levels, various different angles within social sciences. So that's kind of why the name KLAI-descope came about. I also wanted to force insert my name, KLAI, into KLAI-descope because I thought it would be punny and I thought I was clever. If you like it, great. If you don't, please let me know and I'll immediately change the name of the podcast to something else that's a little less cringy, hopefully. So, how I'm structuring this content will be in two different ways. The first way will be solo content. I do realize that I'm not that old, so if I only did solo content, I would probably run out of content by episode 2 or episode 3. But I do have some things that I want to share from my personal experience, things I want to talk about, and hopefully you all will find it interesting in terms of what I've gone through, and hopefully you will also find it valuable. The second way will be through interviews, and I'm really, really excited about this part because they're just going to be casual conversations, first of all, so less pressure to the both of us. But also, it will be a chance for the guests to showcase their knowledge, their research, any organizations they really want to shout out, or just general life, career, catching up type things. So very excited about that part. Also a really good excuse for me to catch up with my friends that I haven't necessarily been catching up with. Sorry about that. I'm really bad with catching up with people. But at the end of the day, I find that this type of content, it's really up to what you listeners want to hear about. So let me know what you want to hear about, what you're curious about, what you're interested about relating to social sciences. My DMs are open for that type of stuff, so feel free to send me questions and feel free to interact with me on any of my socials, which I'll promote at the end of the episode, or you can just go ahead and skip to the end of the episode and find those. And so yeah, that's about the podcast. Hopefully that was all very clear. So next I want to go on to talk a little bit and introduce myself. Who is KLAI? Is he even qualified to talk about this? What if stuff he says is complete fake news? Like, how would you know? Just to go into a little bit of my background, I graduated from Swarthmore College in 2018 with an economics and mathematics degree. I did their honors program, and that's been a pretty fun experience. And I also was a research assistant for some professors in the economics and statistics departments. So I've started my research there. So after I graduated, I was a research analyst at the New York Fed for 2 years. I worked in the financial intermediation group. And basically what we do is we study the intermediaries between a borrower and a lender, or a buyer and a seller. And most of the times it's just basically banks. And so specifically what I worked on is researched about banking organization and structure. And so how the number of affiliates or the geographic span of affiliates, or maybe the business types of affiliates of like a overarching bank holding company like JP Morgan, Bank of America, those big banks that we all know from the news, and how that impacts kind of its market value, how that impacts its risk taking. And so that's one aspect of it. I've also done things in household finance, and so specifically looking at mortgage originations by banks and how that changes around certain regulations. And so that was a really cool use of data specifically. And then things unrelated to that. So international macroeconomics and international finance. And those are typically things about currency and exchange rate exposures. Usually a lot of theory that kind of goes over my head, but really cool when you understand the applications of it, because money is different in different countries, and so like how does the different colored pieces of paper relate to each other? I find that really cool. So those are basically the research topics I worked on in research. And then as of July 2020, I moved into the data and statistics group, and that's pretty much just about data quality and providing analysis to end users. So that could be people in research, that could be people in supervision, just any external stakeholder using our data. And so that's what I do for work. I also have a life outside of work, and so I play a lot of piano. I started since I was 5, played competitively in all throughout middle school, high school, lots of classical music, just lots of time sunk into that. And then in college, I got into chamber music, so playing with violinists and cellists, and that was a really fun experience. And then now I'm just fiddling around with pop songs that I really enjoy, and just kind of play for personal enjoyment and de-stressing, or when I'm bored and have nothing to do at home. Second, I'm very addicted to like ultimate frisbee. Like I love ultimate frisbee. I started in like college, and I've played ever since my freshman year of college. And unfortunately, the pandemic has kept me away from the ultimate frisbee field, and it's really sad. But hopefully, once the pandemic is over, we'll get back to doing that. It's just a really fun sport, and I've met a lot of wonderful people along the way as well. I'm also a very big video games enthusiast. Really love games like League of Legends, played a little bit of Valorant, played a little bit of Fortnite, along with some other solo player games as well. So I played a lot of video games, especially during quarantine, and it's a good excuse for me to catch up with some of my college friends, as well as some people that I normally don't get to see every day. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. Hopefully I convinced some of you that I have at least a little bit of pedigree and some experience to talk about this type of stuff, and I'm not going to be spreading fake news. That's never the intention of this podcast, so no worries there. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up the episode here. I just wanted to say once again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me speak about kind of my dream, my motivation, why this podcast exists, and what I hope to do with it. It definitely will be an exciting time for me to learn and grow, and hopefully you as listeners can find something useful and are along for the ride. So if you want to know when the next episode is going to be posted, or just follow the podcast in general, feel free to follow on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else where podcasts are found. I'm thinking about posting a visual version on YouTube where you can see my beautiful face as I talk about social sciences, both for this episode and for future episodes to come. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to stay updated with my day-to-day life or some random shenanigans that I'm up to, feel free to follow me on Instagram at KMLAIII or on Twitter at KMDLAI. I also have a personal website that documents all of my past projects, current projects, and more description of the podcast. So feel free to check that out at sites.google.com/view/KMLAI1. Wow, that was a lot of self-promotion. We'll take some time getting used to that. But once again, can't say this enough. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to catch you all on the second episode of the Social Science Kaleidoscope. Bye-bye.